for example, like whether I want to get into engineering management or if I want to stay an individual contributor, that kind of classic career decision as well. So, there are also concrete things such as what characteristics do you want to be looking for the next project, the next role, but even longer term things such as what the effect of various different lifestyles and work setups might be like. I got the job at Heroku when we were living in Portland at the time because we were about to have our first kid and we knew we'd be wanting to move back to New Jersey to be closer to family. And I kind of had the approach of, well, if I try it out and I can learn whether full-time remote work is for me, that will have a huge impact on my career choices later on down the line. Very different situation to have chosen that rather than having it be imposed on all of us in this past year, of course. But that was kind of some of the thinking I had at the time. And among other things, I had certain folks that I turned to that had various kinds of experiences with remote work to learn from their experience and see how it might apply for my own life. So finally, don't ever tell my kids this, I will deny it, right? But I love doing things the easy way rather than the hard way. Doing it the easy way is the best. Part of my motivation personally for being an engineer is ultimately I am kind of lazy. And if I can get some information and be able to learn from other experiences rather than always having to learn things firsthand the hard way, why not try to take a shortcut here potentially and just at least consider the information. So that's enough setup here. Let's get into the meat of the talk. I have bucketed my strategies into 3 general sections. The first is adapting a phrase from the movie Glenn Ross, which I haven't actually ever seen. But anyway, I just see this phrase always, and I'm adapting it to always be menteeing as an attitude here. Number 2, finding your kindred spirits, as referenced in Anne of Green Gables, which is the story of an orphan who has lots of misadventures and cares a lot about finding really good friends that you vibe with. And number 3, I've summarized this as keep it easy, breezy, beautiful. It's kind of hard to say this phrase without sticking CoverGirl at the end, just having been inculcated with that. But it's memorable, and according to the internet, CoverGirl isn't using the slogan anymore anyway. So possibly useful as a way to structure this particular talk. So always be menteeing, this first point here. What I mean by this is that I tend to think of mentoring as an ongoing process. It may be short-term, it may be long-term, and I just want to point out that it's totally okay to have more short-term mentoring relationships oriented around a particular topic or goal, such as perhaps giving your first conference talk. Edmund Lau also has an essay on his website, I think, called where he talks about designing the relationship for having effective one-on-ones with your manager, but applies to mentoring as well. He talks a little bit about going into it and just having a sense of, all right, what do we mutually want to get out of this particular relationship, and being able to approach it with I'm a very goal-oriented person generally, and like you can have goals and meet them, and it doesn't necessarily have to be like this lifelong commitment, depending on what you're talking about. When I was chatting with Andrew a little bit beforehand, he pointed out the sense that there are different flavors of mentoring that might be out there as well in terms of different types of things, such as, for example, technical mentoring that could be more focused on, okay, when you have a particular technical decision to make, what are the trade-offs that might happen when you are stepping into technical leadership? How do you account for unknown unknowns or known unknowns, or planning or estimating, or be able to talk to stakeholders about the priorities and values that you set? Why would you go in this direction over another? All of those sorts of questions. We can also talk about mentoring that more has the flavor of coaching, where you receive accountability and support towards some area of growth or development for yourself. So I would consider all of these valid forms that get lumped together under this one heading of mentoring. But I think it can help to think about specifically what may be added value for the current stage you're at, because that can then affect who you're going to for mentoring and how you might approach that relationship. So the second point on kindred spirits, what I mean by this is thinking a little bit about who exactly might make a good mentor for you. Who would you want to receive mentoring from? I feel like a lot of the challenge in those programs I talked about, where you're more or less just somewhat randomly matched up with folks, is that they may not, just because someone is willing to mentor does not necessarily mean that they are the right mentor for you at this moment in time for whatever your goal or goals may be. So if we think about this a little bit more, let's say like, okay, maybe these matching programs, like they may not be the most effective type of situation, and you want to do a more organic approach. How do you go about finding folks along those lines? And we get, as Andrew mentioned at the beginning as well, you might be tempted to approach folks you admire and just ask like, oh, like, will you be my mentor? This is a picture from the classic kids book, like, are you my mother? Just that kind of like asking straight out. And look, I'm all about asking people for help fairly directly. In this case, I feel it is not that effective because it's unclear what someone would be agreeing to when you broach the question in this way. So on the one hand, this is one of my personal pet peeves about Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In book. I know people have had very strong opinions on that one over the years, but overall, I would say like the book is very much about putting the onus on the individual to progress their career. And yet somehow still in the chapter I remember reading in there on mentoring, I thought it still had this attitude that you shouldn't go seeking mentors. They would just sort of do good work and you wait for someone to notice, kind of thing. Which for me just kind of puts me in mind of feeling like I'm back in middle school and being a wallflower at the school dance and just like waiting to be asked. And that's not how I approach the rest of my life these days anyway, because it feels very passive in a way. And so I disagree with this idea of like, oh, just keep your head down until like someone picks you to bestow some mentoring on. I feel like you can be a little bit more active. So how do we reconcile these different approaches then? And my tip is just straight up skip asking this question. People do not need to formally agree to be your mentor in order to actually mentor you. I feel like this was like a key insight, which may be obvious to many folks, but was a real light bulb moment for me, in that mentors don't necessarily need to know that what's happening is that they are mentoring you. So many of the mentors that I have learned a ton from, the organic way that it started was that I just like often had questions or topics that I was wondering about, and they seemed to have really interesting, thoughtful answers. And I just kept asking, just continued to have coffee chats with them or other discussions, catch ups. And then later, afterwards, after they'd helped me so much, I could circle back around and just sort of be like, oh, hey, by the way, I consider you a mentor now. Like whether or not you officially agree to that title, like that's what I feel has been happening. And express that appreciation. Thank you very much for all the advice that you've given me. So for me, some of those characteristics that I look for in a good mentor is someone that I feel like I click with on their values and how they look at the world generally. So we have some commonalities there. For me, I really like direct communicators. I like folks who don't beat around the bush. Like I've just learned about myself that I'm extremely literal. And so for folks where you have to, they're intending to communicate, but for you to pick up some more things in between the lines, like I'm just not very good at it. So it's just easier if we can remove that particular barrier on it. And in terms of personality, like I feel like I often really jive well with folks where you can kind of tell from the outside that, like me, they're probably kind of judgmental inside, at least, but try very hard to be respectful, polite, kind folks on the outside. So, I think it's great to learn how to trick other people into thinking that you're a nice person. That is a helpful thing. And for integrity and morals and all of that sort of thing as well. So there's all of those sorts of characteristics, but I think it's not necessarily just having things in common, because what elevates a friend into a mentor is someone who maybe has had some different life experiences. So the best is really when it's someone who I'm always curious to hear what their take is on something, because I'll be a little bit surprised. And I find I learn so much in these situations where I have that little bit of surprise in there. It can have such a range of topics. Mentors for public speaking, as I've mentioned, remote work, as I mentioned, career changers, parents, even folks that have kids that are a little bit older than mine, learning from how they think about things and like what resources they have found helpful. Again, trying to learn some things a little bit ahead of the curve, a little bit that easy way. So, often my mentors are folks that I think are doing work that I just think is really cool, or they've achieved something that I think I might want, and I really admire them, coupled with this sense of, I think this is a person that I could come to really trust and be willing to be vulnerable with. There are folks that I admire, but it's mostly at a distance, and I may be a little bit too starstruck to get too much out of it, because I think there's an aspect to the mentoring relationship where you have to be willing to brave that fear a little bit. Like it's scary to share that you may not necessarily know what you want or what it is that you dream about being able to achieve, and someone with whom you feel like you can have that relationship of that comfort to express those desires. Like I think that really helps in growth and making that relationship effective. So how do you find people that might match all of these characteristics? Let's talk a little bit about networking. Networking is one of those other topics that I felt like I always heard people talk about, but I didn't really understand how you did it. And this one, the key epiphany for me is to redefine networking and think about it instead as much more lower stakes of, like, I don't know, there's just something about the word networking. If I redefine it instead as, oh, just go out and meet and get to know people, make some friends, express my natural curiosity about people who are different and trying out different things. That has made it so much more approachable for me. So, for example, meeting folks at conferences a lot of times. You would be surprised at how effective it can also just be when you use something out in the world, or you appreciate something and you actually let the author of that work know that was a really good and positive experience for you. There are folks who have blogs I follow for years, and every so often I just pipe up again and be like, oh yeah, this advice was really helpful to me, and I used it in this particular way, 1, 2, 3. Or I can try to pay it forward for even in advance for them, of like, oh yeah, so and so, I heard that they have this series of beginner level projects that are really helpful for folks, and like try to spread and pass that along, and then let them know, like, oh yeah, just like I'm a fan of their work, and like these are the ways in which it's helped. More and more as well, I feel like you will see on Twitter or on blogs or whatever else, where people will just put out there like, oh hey, I'm often like I'm totally happy to schedule calls with folks to get to know them and see different ways in which I can help. And when I've talked to folks who put their time out there on the internet in that way, they usually say like very, very few people actually take them up on those offers. So that's just like such a huge opportunity, I think, there. Like if you see that come out, make a note of it and just give it a shot, like, and go ahead and talk and see if it might end up being someone that you click with, that you can talk about a lot of those topics that I've mentioned. It is definitely going to be awkward at times. This is a phrase that I learned from another good friend of mine, where she just is like, steer into the skid a little bit of awkwardness. I feel like a lot of my maturing as an adult is just like being okay with things being a little bit awkward, like making a little bit of joke about it as needed, laughing it off, and just having compassion for yourself and any other folks that may be involved in this awkward situation. Very few folks are really trying to make you feel bad about this necessarily, you know? Like, I think for the most part, uh, if, for example, if you sat in an audience with a conference talk from someone who's clearly very nervous, I feel like sometimes it's actually a really nice communal experience, because I can just feel everyone in the crowd like wishing this person well and like hoping that they can get to a point where they feel more confident and like being really interested in what they have to say. So let's talk about this last bit of making it easy. Now that you have found and gotten to know some cool potential mentors, what next year? Maybe you want to reach out and see if they'll answer a few questions. Maybe you can go grab coffee sometime in, you know, COVID safe ways now these days. And at this stage, what I mean by this is that it's all about making it easy for that person to say yes to your request to helping you. So when reaching out to people, talking about logistics, try to schedule it with their time in mind, offering up a location that's convenient for them, or if you're not co-located, picking a commonly used platform, something that's easy for them to say yes or no to. It would be ideal to give them a sense of the topic or why exactly you specifically are reaching out to them specifically, so that they can think about it ahead of time, perhaps, and not feel like they have to be totally off the cuff, or that it's going to be open-ended in some way. Like I know for myself, when folks reach out to talk to me, I'm just definitely the kind of person that I have to spend time to think about how I feel about something. So if the more preparation I have, like the easier it is to have a good conversation about that. And overall, you know, just taking care of these logistics and setting things up so that ideally these folks whose time is probably hard to get on their radar necessarily, if you can set it up so that all they have to do is just show up for the time that you've blocked out, that'll make it a lot easier for them to agree, hopefully. So, like, let's think a little bit about this. Breezy, I just mean like try to keep things again low key and casual. The not having to make it feel like, oh, like we're entering into this like lifelong commitment that's going to be a really huge deal. I find that in general, the closer the connection in your situations and background, the better chance you might have. So as I mentioned, you know, I'm interested, if you write to someone and say, I'm interested in your opinion because you also came from a boot camp background and you know, have had a couple jobs since then, and I really want to talk about, you know, whatever else that you can tell that you feel like they have a unique perspective on. And just kind of this attitude of, I know about your work, I respect it, and I really would like to learn from you specifically as a person, rather than any other person that you might run into on the internet or in the real world. So this one is mostly just like a grab bag, the things I put together on this heading. And what I'm meaning by this is like, how do we learn things that will be relevant for you, that like you can put into action effectively? And the first one is just that it is okay to not know what to talk about. You know, as much as you can, being specific can help, but sometimes nonetheless, it's still a little overwhelming, especially when you're at the beginning of building that relationship with someone, perhaps. So one approach that I find really helpful is I read about this from Cal Newport, and he talks about it for talking to folks less like you're trying to get life advice and more almost like a journalist, to that you're interviewing a particular subject and just learning more about their individual experience. And if you collect a whole bunch of these, you may be able to draw some conclusions yourself to see how it applies to your own career. So even specifically, rather than asking for advice, because sometimes people don't necessarily generalize from their experience in a way that's applicable to you, if you have them talk to you about what they were thinking as in their particular journeys, you can then extrapolate the insights for yourself and analyze it on your own to see, look for patterns or key differences there. So some sample topics, problem solving, current dilemmas you might be facing, talking about options, feedback on proposed solutions. One example of this is I had a mentor who was really working closely with me at one point for a promotion that I was working on. And then after we succeeded at that, there was a conversation where I was just kind of like, hey, like, is it okay that I don't feel the need to immediately press for the next promotion after this one? Like, I feel like I see everyone around me is like just really pressing on, and I just don't feel that drive right now. Is there something wrong with me? Is that okay? And my mentor straight up was like, no, of course that's fine. I know you, and I know that you're never going to accidentally stagnate because you're going to be bored. Like, you will be bored, and that will be your motivation to continue getting back to going into the next level. And once she said that, I was like, oh, she's right. And I really respect her judgment and opinion. So even though I didn't consider this about myself, like, someone I trust has this opinion about how I operate based on her close experience. So I can trust that for, that particular dilemma I was facing at the time. I love having conversations with folks about decision-making processes. Anything you ever run into that's like, oh, well, it depends. It's like a case-by-case basis. Like, okay, what does it depend on? Like, what are the specifics of like what we think we know in this situation, and why does this drive our decision? And I think that can help you really prepare for building up some sense of intuition in the future, because I have a lot of theoretical conversations with folks of, okay, I better understand now this decision at this moment in time. What if we were to change one or two variables here? How might that affect the outcome? And then you can know, are those variables important or not? What would have changed your mind on this? What new information would be useful to you? All of these sorts of things I think are really interesting conversations to have with folks. Getting a peek behind the scenes for how folks have approached these things. So there's a phrase that I really enjoyed called effort shock, in that we're so used to having like the final result from someone's project-based efforts or learning efforts. And when you are able to talk to people in depth about what it took to get to their level of expertise, you can get those real details and set your expectations appropriately for like what it would take to get to that particular level of skill. What strategies they may have, what is worth spending time on, what is not worth spending time on, and to know more about as well, like, one way to address feelings of imposter syndrome or just feeling like you may not be good enough is having these concrete examples of, oh yeah, other people make mistakes too. How do they work past them? What do they learn from them? How do you approach it and try to do better in the future? There's a bumper sticker type thing I've seen somewhere that I really enjoy. That's something like, make better mistakes tomorrow, which I just really like as a philosophy and approach to life. Always also personal feedback as well, in terms of, kind of like that mentor I had of like, okay, well, this next step, what do you think I should be doing here? How do you see me? Well, what do you think would be helpful for me? This can be really hard. Like, this is where that trust and willingness to be vulnerable really pays off. But it's a very fruitful topic as well, just to get a sense of what someone outside of you, what do they see of your work and the impression that you make. And I think it's also really important to remember, like, you don't have to actually follow all of the advice. The commitment I think you enter into when you're having these conversations, folks, is that at the very minimum, you will think about it, you will consider it. And yeah, sure, if you never follow any of the advice and you never make any changes, then maybe this isn't quite the right mentoring relationship for you or what you want at the time. But I think it also kind of helps, again, reduce some of those barriers or resistances you might have, because you don't have to just do exactly what someone else thinks that you should do. It's just additional data for you as you are in charge of what you want to do next. Overall, a lot of these things, I feel like it's about how can you make yourself someone who's really fun to mentor with and just make it kind of rewarding. It's not necessarily literal gifts. Sometimes I do buy, uh, I'm in a position where I really enjoy buying gifts for people off of their baby registries, for example. Like, I don't know, baby things are tiny and they're cute and doesn't cost that much money usually. Random things like that, occasionally maybe. But even things that aren't about money, but like getting good at writing really good thank you notes that again have specific references that demonstrate reflection, checking with folks and letting them know, oh yeah, this is what I ended up doing, to just go ahead and follow up and stay in touch. I literally have a monthly Google Calendar reminder that's just like, do some kind of networky thing. And usually how that plays out is just like sending a note to an old coworker or old boss of mine and just to be like, oh, hey, like I ran into this thing and like I still think about this one thing that you told me from years ago. Like it's really had a big impact, and just kind of stay in touch with folks that way. So this is a quote that I really enjoyed from a blog post I read, which is like, people just like, it gives people a lot of warm, fuzzy feelings just to know that what they did had an impact. Like that's the currency that you have for getting some of that great mentorship. So these relationships with trust allow you to get some of that honest advice that you might not be able to get elsewhere. So once you have that, you can also, I think, you will also become a better mentee if you, once you do some mentoring yourself as well. So, an example may be a friend of mine who's a teacher. They worried about being pushy or condescending. The teacher can take responsibility that it's their job to manage the classroom, like they have the power dynamics on their side, but you can also help the teacher as well, if you've been on that side, like, oh yeah, making eye contact and giving feedback to that teacher. This handbook from Thoughtbot like has a lot of interesting things to say as well, like how do you be a good mentor, and then translating that to figure out, oh, is there a way I can be a better mentee as a result? Okay, cool. So let's go through some of these resources. These are a whole bunch of articles that I have found really helpful for, the stage of reaching out to people initially. Many more articles. This is just a topic that I've been really obsessed with for years now, literally. A whole bunch of podcasts as well. And a little bit of a self plug for the other talk I mentioned on ask versus guest cultures that I think is really just like a really interesting framing for communication styles. And then these are folks that are just really awesome blogs related to management and workplace dynamics and building relationships. I've learned a ton from all of them. In terms of books, these are 3 books that I'm really obsessed with that talk a lot about growing your career as a developer, or just any kind of like really deep knowledge-based work. So highly recommend all those there. So yeah, that's it. That's the end there. Trying to keep an eye on the time and make sure I left some time for questions and discussion. Thank you so much.
It was amazing. Thank you so much. I didn't see a lot of questions come through the chat, but does anybody have anything they want to ask Katherine?
I have a question.
Yeah.
When you are reaching out to potential mentors, like you've identified someone that you think might be a match, in your experience, how often is it someone that actually ends up being kind of a longer term relation, like mentorship relationship? And how often is it like kind of more of a one-time thing?
Yeah, that's a really good question. In that kind of like the ROI on reaching out, or just like how frequently is it short-term versus long-term types of things. I feel like this has changed over time because as I've adjusted my approach and figured out who I want to approach for these sorts of questions. And I'm also, for me at least anyway, I'm at a standpoint where I feel like I have a fairly deep bench of folks that I know, like, oh, if I have a question on this area, I can reach out to someone in this vicinity. I think when you're just getting started, it feels more random, I feel, of like who you actually hit it off with. And I don't know about you all, but I feel like my experience is I go through the world and like, for whatever reason, there are like not that many people that I really feel a connection with. Like maybe it's again that inherent judginess inside me or whatever that I'm working on, like being a more kind and compassionate person out there. But it's just it's hard to find that long-term spark, perhaps. Nonetheless, I feel like with this sort of approach, even if it's just kind of like a short-term type of conversation, at a minimum, you maybe reach out to someone if you consider them, I don't know, more senior in your community or like more of a public figure, and you can learn that like, okay, this person is like really good at writing technical blog posts. They're not that great at talking through what they're thinking in person. So like, what you learn is that the best way to learn from this person is to keep up with their writing. And have specific questions related to that. Like they may not be a good person to have longer free flowing discussions with. Whereas other people, like I think I have to keep in mind sometimes is that for me, I'm just like, I love structure. I love organization. Like I love like dotting your I's and crossing your T's and just like super type A about these things. And for some of us, as I get to know them, I realize a little bit like be authentic, but also like soften those edges a little bit sometimes. So like to not trigger like any insecurities they may feel about how they approach, because like there's, I'm talking to them because there's something that I want to learn from them still, and just trying to find a way to extract some of those insights from them.
Thank you.
I want to add something to you mentioned sort of the difference between technical mentoring and some of these kind of things. There's technical mentoring, coaching, mentoring. There's all these different things, that these different types of relationships. But I think I think what you were trying to hit on was the most important thing is just to like come to the relationship knowing what you need from the person, right? Like be able to articulate like, I'm trying to reach a goal. Help, like, or do you have anything you can help me like kind of focus on reaching the goal, or I need to learn this thing, or like just be clear about whatever it is. You don't even need to know what's really like how people would define the relationship. It's more important just that you're clear about what you need from the person.
Yeah. Or as I said, like if you start off with like, hey, like I recently completed a boot camp, I'm trying to get my first entry level job. And I remember going on so many of those interviews right after finishing Hackbright, and all these companies would be like, well, what are you interested in? Like, and what do you want to learn? And I just constantly was like, I don't know what I want to learn. Like, I'm just starting. How can I possibly, I want a job so that I can be paid is what I actually really want. But in talking to folks about mentoring, that would be a situation where an ideal mentor at that stage would be someone who had recently been in that bootcamp situation and also came out of it feeling like at that moment in time they were more of a generalist. And so I might find folks that are oftentimes, if you look for folks that are like 3 or 4 years ahead of where you think you are right now, so it's like that experience is very top of mind for them still, and just ask them like, oh, hey, like in those 3 or 4 years since, like, how did you end up being really interested in security engineering? Like, how did that even happen? Where did you get started to how did you learn what it is that you're interested in? Because like none of us comes out of the womb knowing any of this. It happens at some point. So if you can figure out some more of those experiences, it can help then guide like, okay, well, now that I think one goal is I want to explore this area, now who do I talk to for that next step there?
I love that advice of finding someone who's just a few years ahead of you, because like I'll talk to people who are just starting out now, and like my experience doesn't really apply. Like I started doing like web development when all of HTML fit on a single printed page and with definitions, and like it was just a very different world, right? So I love that, like 3 or 4 years is probably a really good metric for because it's kind of where you want to be, but it's like near term enough that you can kind of see the steps still.
Yeah. And again, if the first person that you want to work with, like even if they are longer term experience, it's just a different perspective of what interesting conversations you might have for folks that have been around since the when everything was like simpler in terms of structure and types of things, like I feel like there's probably a lot I could learn about what you feel like are things that were unique to that moment in time that no longer apply. And maybe there are certain things we assume continue to apply forward, but it's just an assumption. Those values don't really hold anymore. But I'm sure there are also plenty of things where you're like, yep, like this was a thing we used to complain about back in the day, and this is still a thing that we complain about now. Like we just changed some of the names of the stacks that we're talking about, but like the frustration is still like, I'm frustrated with entropy. Everything turns towards chaos in the end. It's like a never ending work there.
I have a question that's like kind of COVID specific. I feel like I am really good people person, and I'm really good in person and like at events and meeting people and like reading their energy. But I feel so awkward on Zoom. Like even just introducing you, I felt so awkward the whole time. And then when you were like, embrace the awkward, I was like, thank you. But like, I don't know. It's I haven't adjusted, and like I just don't. I feel like at a deficit because we are remote. Whereas if we were in person, I know that I would excel at that. And so I'm just like kind of curious if you have any advice for new developers kind of navigating networking when it is either Zoom meetings or just like more Slack. It's just like a different toolbox.
Yeah, it is totally different. So that's a great question for the environment that we've been in. And what I would ask you, perhaps Rachel, if you wanted to reflect, is like, I think what you're already recognizing is that trying to make those connections over screens, like through when you're not co-located, like it is just different. I firmly believe like we are monkeys, like we are like our biological systems are just so much better evolved, like when we're sharing the same space with someone and just like getting to know someone that way. So the first thing is like recognizing that connecting through Zoom or whatever else, even if it's over phone calls only, like that is a different skill than what you have been used to. And I wonder whether some of the pressure you have been feeling is that you are comparing the results and effect to things that like, it's not an apples to apples comparison that you're really being able to make right now. So like, if you're feeling like you haven't, like I just compared to like when you very first started using Zoom or video chat regularly to connect with those, like I would bet that there's like differences in how you've approached it since then, or if you wanted to think a little bit more about in this particular medium. Like I know when I first worked in a job where we were regularly collaborating with, I was in New York at the time, and the team we were working with was in India. So we only really interacted like somewhat rarely at these meetings that were like really late for us and really early for them, or really early for them and really late for us kind of thing. It's just like really hard. And we would try to, we didn't always have the budget necessarily to do an offsite and like meet each other in person. And something that I learned from those is to like almost like hype up my energy a little bit more than I would otherwise, to try to like break through the screen a little bit more, finding ways to like really pay attention to small details people may share more than I would normally. Like if I were doing this in person, it would come off as a little stalker-ish probably, but because of like videos, like having this a little bit barrier at, hopefully, I don't know, it smooths the edges out a little bit more of like, oh yeah, you mentioned this one personal detail one time, and now I would like make sure to remember it and like reference back to it and like try to find common ground and talk about things, and like setting aside time to get past that barrier of like, oh yeah, you're a person, I'm a person, like, like you're not just like a name on a screen, like you're a real person on the other end here. I also did things where I tried to think of creative ways to like care packages, essentially, like in that particular working relationship, because it was longer term. We at one point were working with, someone decided to do releases named after Girl Scout cookies. So like the first one was Thin Mint and the next one was Samoa or whatever else, something like that. And I had the idea that once Girl Scout season actually came around, I was like, I don't really know why we picked this, because like this is such an American specific way of reference. Like they're just using it, but it means nothing to them. So I was like, told my manager, like, can I expense like literally buying some boxes of these Girl Scout cookies to send to the folks that on our team and share this with them, just to sort of be like, to try to have that connection again of, okay, this is what we've been talking about all along, like, just like make it a little bit real, and have a thing that's like, not necessarily, let me get this number of points on this story done, trying to be more creative about that sort of thing. It's hard.
Thank you for sharing.
Edema or Edema? I think you had your hand up earlier.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. There is this sort of thing that nobody. You said something about commitment. People are actually afraid of commitment and the like. So, as a potential mentor that you want to get, how do you actually come in such a way that they will see you as someone that is also going to be helpful for them? Sometimes we talk about commitment and other kind of getting to be committed to somebody or having a sense of responsibility to somebody, like, tend to kind of shy off, especially if it's going to be for a longer period of time. But if they notice that they are going to learn, gain one or two things from it, they might decide to lend out a helping hand. So as a mentee, you have a potential mentor and you want to reach out to the person. How do you come in such a way that you also have something to contribute to the person, so as to be able to possibly get the person's attention?
I'm so sorry, but the audio is not coming through very well for me. Is there any chance that you can, if you want to type the question and maybe I can read it that way and try to address it? It's I don't know if it's the connection for me. It's very echoey what you were saying.
It was a little hard for me to hear it as well. But one thing I thought I heard you say was, like, how do you make it clear that you have something to contribute as well to the mentoring relationship? So the other person is, you clearly want something from them, but you have something to give them as well. Is that part of it?
Yeah, definitely. Because people are always kind of protective of their time, and sometimes they're also afraid of that commitment, even somebody, especially if it's going to be for a longer period of time. But if they notice that they will get to have something to gain from it in the long run, they might want to help. You understand?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
How do you come at that moment so that the person will also feel that you have something to contribute to, even as a mentee?
Yeah, totally. I love that you're thinking about it this way in terms of it's a two-way street, like there is something to be contributed there. And I think the way that I approach these situations is that I'm not trying to use words to persuade someone that I have something to offer here. If I feel like I have something to give and to contribute, what I generally try to do is to just put it out in the world regardless, and just give and demonstrate through actions, like the respect that I have for the time that they're sharing with me, the thoughtfulness I'm going to put into it. So for example, there are some mentors that I have had where I just was always such a fan of their work for a really long time. And regardless of whether I was looking to receive mentorship from them or have a one-on-one conversation, I was talking up their work to other folks, just like, oh yeah, like this really helped me. And like that everything I was saying about going ahead and making sure you give people that positive feedback when you have it, even if you don't. It's kind of like laying the groundwork, like just going about in the world sharing, like, this is like really helpful to me, like this is what I have to give, and putting it out there. I think it's certainly the case that it can be easier in some situations than others. I know for me, especially after I had kids, like I more or less like have mostly dropped off of Twitter. Like I just don't, that's not a really good forum for me in terms of like output and sharing back and like being involved in the community in that way. But it's one reason why I really enjoy doing these sorts of talks instead, and feel like, okay, well, I can like give back and like put this out there in that way. And don't know what the ROI is going to be on it necessarily, but hopefully as a general way of being in the world and working with it, that it will pay off at some point if I wanted to call on it. Yeah, I think this is one of those situations where just actions speak really loudly for how you approach it, and people can tell like when you're putting thought into what you're doing there, and as you polish your approach over time.
We have a couple more questions out there. Don't be shy.
Hi, this is Asaya, and I'm just curious to know what you do at Heroku.
Oh, yeah. So I have been on the web services team at Heroku, and more recently on like the identity team. So basically we are at like the center of a lot of things related to baseline. For folks that if you haven't heard of Heroku before, we are a platform that you can use to deploy your apps out into the cloud. So if you have an app locally, the classic marketing spiel is all you have to do for your Ruby app is to do git push Heroku, and it will just like magically get out there like with a Heroku based URL that you could send someone to, and your app is now live, rather than having to go in and like, all right, like I have to like open up an AWS console and like configure it and like set all of these DevOps sort of things that you'd have to deal with there. So within all of that, if you've used the product before, among other things, a lot of the internal core API for like all of your objects related to your Heroku stuff, like we own that. Recently, our big push on identity, we're responsible for the login experience. So when you go to Heroku.com and you want to sign into the dashboard, you get sent to id.heroku.com. That's the team that I work on. Most recently, we launched an integration with another Salesforce service for multi-factor authentication. So previously, if you wanted to do, increase the security of your account and do 2FA, like it was only like using a Google Authenticator or other kind of time-based one-time password system. But now that we have launched this integration, it's no longer just two-factor authentication, but multi-factor authentication, in which you can use these kinds of authenticator apps. You can use YubiKeys. You can use like your local other ways of just having that other additional factor for authentication and security type things. Okay, hopefully that was comprehensible.
Very helpful. Thanks for the.
Okay. Yeah.
Sahil, did you have a question too?
If it's okay, if there's time, if not.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. This is kind of maybe a little personal. I'm kind of exposing myself here, but one of the things that attracts me about seeking out a mentor is sort of the one-on-one nature of it. I don't do too well in groups, and I guess the reason I would want one is because I kind of have a strong sense of like what I want to do and what I need to do. There's just a lot of kind of personal doubt of putting myself out there.
Mm-hmm.
And is that a reason to seek out a mentor, or is that more like you probably should go to therapy for that? Like, what's the distinction between mentorship and therapy?
Yeah.
This is a
I am. Yeah. No.
separate question. If there's time for it, is do you ever recommend? Like, I've seen some like paid type things where like, like interview coaching that kind of blurs the line between interview prep and mentoring. Do you recommend steering away from that, or do you see that being valuable as well, or do you recommend sticking to like just free, like genuine relationships? That's my other question.
Yeah, those are all really great. And well, first, just like thank you for being willing to share that and ask a question like that. Like that's really interesting to me because to make that connection of like how does mentoring fit in as compared to a therapy based type relationship. I actually happen to be in the process of trying to like I've wanted to get into therapy for various things like that I'm working on or whatever else, but I'm in the process a little bit of like trying to find a therapist that like I feel like that's going to be a productive relationship with. And I'm told from others who have more experience that it can take some time, but when you find someone you really click with, that can be really amazing for whatever personal growth you may be looking towards. I would say like I think you're right that there's actually a lot of overlap between what you can find in a mentoring relationship, a really deep one, versus what you may be getting out from therapy. Out of therapy, I feel like those are folks that are specifically professionally trained to help, and they have a lot of experience navigating a diverse set of folks, hopefully a diverse set of folks, through whatever challenges they're facing in their life and stories in their own background that they're trying to reconcile over time. Whereas most mentors that we're talking about in this context, like for a career development type thing, one, you're talking about it in a professional context, so you may not necessarily be wanting to share like, oh, these are my deep dark secrets from my like these are the ways in which my parents messed me up. Like that's probably not a conversation that I have a mentor, but like there are mentors / friends that I feel like I've gotten close enough with where I'm open to sharing like, yeah, like this is a thing that like I know I have a chip on my shoulder about, like, because my parents were always blah, blah, blah. And like, it helps them know me as like a complete person, you know? So like that there can be some blurry lines there, but a lot of these mentors that we're talking about, they're like quote unquote qualified to be mentors because they have done work that you are interested in doing. So like that mentoring relationship, and to some extent is like, oh, I want to learn from them because potentially I want to be them, or I want to have the lifestyle that they have. And my understanding is that there are a lot of folks that really admire the therapists that they have in a similar way as well. But the therapists are better trained to guide you like for your specific situation, and how to approach your feelings. Like I'm reading a lot about emotional development in kids, and more I think that like I also watched the Mr. Rogers movie and documentaries recently. So like I'm just really hugely on this kick that like if we all from kids to adults, including myself, if we are all better at feeling our feelings and accepting that we have our feelings and responding to them in like civilized ways, we would like resolve so many of the world's problems. Like that's kind of my personal soapbox currently. Anyway, there's a book I really loved that I read last year called what it's called. The author's name is Lori Gottlieb. She writes a column in The Atlantic called Ask a Therapist. And the name of the book is Maybe You Should Talk to Someone. Not sure if folks have heard about this before. I loved it. I thought it was fascinating. It's a little bit of a combination memoir for herself, but also writing about her work as a therapist. And it talks about some of, like anonymized stories from clients and like what actually happens in therapy, and also her own experience as a therapist getting therapy for herself, in a really fascinating sort of way. So if you're interested in learning more, just like it was something I was very curious about, and I thought it was great. I loved it.
Thank you.
That
Thank you
was
much.
a lot of words. I hope that. Oh, you had the other question about paid programs. This is something I feel I am not qualified to talk on because I haven't actually ever done any of those programs or paid coaching. I guess in general, for me, my default attitude would be like some level of skepticism there, perhaps, but I'm sure there are good ones out there. So if I were looking into it, that would be the sort of thing where I feel like I would want a testimonial from someone that I do well going into it, like that, like the more of a personal referral you can get to a specific program. Because like that's got to be a thing, like personal coaches or career coaches generally, where like there's such a range of outcomes you might have in the industry that just because it has the same title or description, like doesn't necessarily carry that much weight. I feel like yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I would add to that. I think like you were kind of gravitating towards coaching, which I think is actually maybe a better activity for a paid relationship, where you have a goal, somebody can kind of like coach you through. Like it doesn't matter so much if they have the exact same domain expertise or they're in the exact spot that you want to be in, but there are sort of methods that coaches can use generically to help you get to your goals. Whereas a mentorship relationship, I would personally, and my bias would be towards that person being somebody that's invested in your success, and more so than just because you're paying them, right? So I think there might be a distinction to be made there.
Thank you. Thanks so much. That's awesome.
This was amazing, Katherine. Thank you so much. Thanks so much for your time, and thanks for also rolling with the time. Like we were actually supposed to do this at 5 Eastern and not 5 Pacific, but there's a guy with 2 thumbs who messed up the time, and we ended up doing it now. So thanks everybody for.
I didn't check it over. You sent me the link, and I just was like, oh yeah, 5,
well.
whatever. And I forgot time zones were a thing.
You were very.
I literally have a conference talk about like why time zones are hard and how I messed this up previously and how I try to fix it. And it's just like it's just a truth going forward. Time zones are really hard.
Yeah, for sure. But thanks everybody for coming. We'll post the recording to meet up, tonight or tomorrow. And thank you again so much, Katherine, for the great talk and all the great questions too, everybody. Thanks. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
I would just say I'm bad at reading and talking at the same time. I feel like there's like a couple more questions that came through in the chat. I don't know if I'll get a chance to review them when we end the Zoom meeting, but if anyone ever wants to reach out to me, like my Twitter handle is all over the slides in the promotion. Like feel free to DM me there as a way to get started, and we can figure out how to continue the conversation if folks are interested.
Great. Thanks so much. Have a good night, everybody.
Thanks so much for your time.
Take care.
Bye.